You can't just be like, here's a 2-sentence thing, go do something. Now, you can do that with a human, because that human's got a bunch of built-in context that you've given them over time, and they absorb from the environment and all those other things. The bots, at least today, can't do that. Now, they can absorb context from the environment that's current through certain interfaces and things like that.
And with the right rules, they'll pull it in. If you have like a repository of these things, it will pull them in. That's where these MCP servers are coming in to get the information that it needs along the way without having to give it every time.
Yeah, but they're still nowhere near as good as a really smart person that's been around the space, that knows the product, knows the customers, understands how we got here. That's still a way smarter thinker than the bots.
Unless you have just that good of documentation that is perfect representation of somebody's brain, that doesn't exist.
Because why would you? That would be silly. The organic brain is still quite great at pattern recognition. I think there's still some sophistication that happens in the human brain that they seem to have not caught yet. 2026, let's go. Very exciting. We took a little bit of a hiatus there. We got busy.
People were asking me about that. I had people ask me, you guys taking a break? What's going on? Like, yeah, it's the holidays. It's all that stuff, family stuff, and people sick.
Hospitals and all these things. So
broken bones.
Yes, I know. We both families managed to have one of those. So that was fun. Cool. But we're back, and it's middle of January 16th. We're recording this. And the topic we wanted to talk about today is something we actually were just talking about a couple of days ago. So I'll frame it up, and then Jason, let you kind of get going on it. But essentially, what we were talking about, the problem that I think exists with all the AI tools, right? So this is how do we exist as a software development shop in the world of AI with Claude Code, with Cursor, with anti-gravity, all the things. One of the things that we realized is, you can ship really, really fast. It's great. And it's completely upending the SDLC, which is, I think, a good thing. But one of the drawbacks is we're also seeing it's like when you're writing a paper for school or something like that, right? Like the effort involved in writing the paper causes you to think it through more deeply. And, I think that's one of the things that's happened in the past with code. We're building a product and there's so many nuances and so much that needs to be thought through. What about this trade-off and that trade-off and this experience and that experience? But when I can just ship something like in a couple hours, I don't ever think about all that, right? And then you get later on, you're like, oh, we've shipped it. It's in dev or it's in prod. And then you're like, oh, but we didn't think about this. We're seeing that happen to us a lot more.
The huge effects of that. You don't think something through entirely. You miss something. You could get it to prod and you're going to have that prod issue really fast. If you had that resistance to getting it into production, meaning the time in the thought process, you may have thought through some of those edge cases that didn't end up having the AWS bill spike by $1,500 because, you just didn't think of one edge case that edge case is actually expensive. And that's where the resistance of software development and I thought about this because it took time to work on the problem, and your brains are going to be thinking through these problems while you're coding and thinking of some of these branches, or you take a break, but it's really not a break. You're not writing stuff, but you're still thinking. Yeah. And so they're like, oh crap, I forgot about this. That would have been bad, wouldn't it? Yeah. I could probably need a group of people's hands to count the fingers of how many times it's happened of, oh yeah, I'm glad we didn't ship that because we didn't think through this case. It would have been catastrophic had we not thought through that. So, being that you can ship things, to your point, multiple times a day, you're not doing that. You're still not doing that thinking, but you don't give yourself the time to process and have those little aha moments that might just save your ass.
Yeah, no, totally. So we kind of paused our conversation midstream. We're like, hey, well, let's just wait and have this conversation on the podcast. Because what we're saying is like, hey, I'm doing this. You're doing this. Obviously, the team is doing it to some degree. What are our mitigants? We talked about one of them, which is feature flag yourself, right? Like, we have to probably be more aggressive about micro feature flags, micro short-lived feature flags. Maybe we bang on stuff a little bit more in prod, but if we do that in a way that's safe, then that's okay. Get it in there. This is in our world with our product. No matter how much we try, our test environments just don't look like our customers' environments.
They're never going to. It's not organic.
We're a small startup. We can mirror it and kind of make it, but some of our customers have tens of thousands of apps, right? Like we get in there to a totally different ballgame. And
because it's years and years of just organically changing over time. And it was true once and now it's not true. And now we don't have to have these fields anymore. And now, but they're here. We still have to account for those. There's hundreds of those decisions happening and evolving the data sets where it's this value now, but it's that value later. And they've mitigated it in their own software. But yet we're ingesting it. We can't replicate that without spending weeks of work to try to replicate a prod-like
it's
system.
idiosyncratic to them, right? And so it's like, because the next customer, it's not useful because their idiosyncrasy is totally different. So it doesn't scale. And so a lot of our testing of, especially of experiences, right, happens in prod. And so like feature flags help, it doesn't really help solve the core problem. I'm sure like the AI experts would be like, well, this is why you have good code reviews and all that type of stuff. And I don't think what I'm sort of trying to, and you tell me if you disagree with this, because you mentioned the AWS bill, which is a good point, because there's technical implications. But like in my mind, it's not just the technical aspect. Is the code right? Is there an edge case in the code? Have we fully thought through the product implications? How might I want to use this? Or is there another part of the app that this data is going to be relevant to? In our case, we had a recent example, right, where we expanded the ability to attach a certain type of data to another certain type of data, right? And we were able to do that, boom, 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 really fast for the use case that we were trying to solve for one of our customers. But because we did it so fast, we didn't think through the implications of like 4 steps away and somewhere else in the product of it's not going to match up because that piece is missing over there. Some of that's fine. You iterate and you solve for it. I was thinking about this morning, actually. It's like we went from Waterfall, right? Like, I mean, I don't even know if kids even know about Waterfall these days, but like, Waterfall, the formal thing, which is kind of like the way that buildings get built, right? Like you have all the plans get drawn out, all the specs, all the basic technical decisions are made, business and technical decisions are made up front, whatever the document is, the business requirements document, all those things. It might be 50 pages long or 100 pages long, whatever, with full wireframes and mock-ups and all this stuff. And then you're expected to execute against that to a very specific schedule. People thought we would build software like you build a building. And that became clearly not the right way to do things.
In some cases it can. For the vast majority of cases, it's the worst idea. But there are some cases that are...
But my point is we moved away from it, right? We moved away from that.
It's bad. Generally speaking, it's bad. Well, bad for timing. It just takes so long to do it that way.
Well, because your point, right? Like, yes. I mean, we talked about this before, I think. It's doing that diligently, thinking through everything. Might take 3 months, might take 6 months, might take 9 months. So then your thinking is frozen in time. And then you got to wait however long it takes to get that whole thing delivered. Well, that's an eternity. It might be 12 months, it might be 6 months, whatever it is. And you don't have the ability to make a change without a huge cost to that, to your point. And then so we went to Agile, right? Where the idea was progressive enhancement as you go. When the internet used to be slower and the picture would get sharper. That theoretically is how Agile should work. Now, the funny thing is it's like, instead of the picture getting sharper, it's like, I got a Polaroid right now, right? Like I built it, it's done. It's photorealistic, but it's not perfect. The shadows aren't quite right. Like it's kind of cool, but it's not quite ready. It's almost like we've inverted the problem where it's like, I can build it so fast. It's like in some cases after you build it is when you do the thinking. And it's really weird. The emergent behavior is really weird because obviously you say that out loud. It's like, well, that sounds ridiculous. Why would you do that? But that's kind of what's happening to us. And so is it a question of how do we best harness this dynamic to be as effective as we can? Do we lean into that and we say, okay, cool, that's the way it is. So let's make that effective. Do we get more disciplined about the upfront? Like, I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Writing of the code was never the problem. You've said it, I've said it. Writing the code has always been the easiest part. So now we've optimized.
People get so mad at us when we say that.
We have these bots now that can write code faster than we've ever had before. I don't write much code as it is anymore. It's just the bots are writing almost everything I do. Yeah, I tweak it. Yeah, I adjust it. But the speed at which I can deliver that has just skyrocketed. I can tell when I have given it a bad prompt and a good prompt. I've even tested this side by side and tested the implementation of it. And 10 out of 10 times, if I give it a bad prompt with very little information, I get a bad outcome. I have a good prompt, 7 out of 10 times I'll get a good result. 3 out of 10, maybe just okay or bad. But it takes the same amount of time either way to do that. Zooming out to the thinking of it, it's all the context that you have to give these agents and these bots. This outcome could still be the same, but all the guardrails you have to give it along the way as well. And your production readiness, your logging, your monitoring, your product requirements. That stuff, from what I've seen, is that I have to build it up front and tell it some of those guardrails, either in your agent documents, your claw.md files, your agents.md files. To your point, where's the thinking happen? It still has to happen up front. But once you do, your rocket ship just being able to go and build these things. But that work still has to get done up front to define what is good, what is right, or else you're going to have a bad time. These models are still just predictive models. They still go off of what they're predicting is the right thing. And if you're not giving that thought up front and saying, well, okay, I need you to think through these edge cases, those edge cases, the compute is predicting what the right outcome is based off of what little that you've given it. And that's where you're seeing a lot of these pop-ups now of the Ralph Wiggins, the overseer model where you have one overseer model that's watching the subagents. That thinking needs to happen, and you can offset some of that into these loops or these overseers or these orchestrators. It's going to think through some of it, but not enough. All that to say is that these pop-ups now, these startups or these open source patterns are all coming in because you still have to think before and during implementation is the wrong time.
If we think about like the life cycles of how this stuff used to happen, because like you mentioned the product requirements. Well, the product requirements are the thing in many ways that need to be thought through the most deeply. And historically, we've built products either solo or together, or even not as much in the enterprise environments because there's so many stakeholders that kind of happens in a different way. But in our type of environments, basically what we'd say is, okay, I'd have a paragraph probably level of the product requirements, and then the product requirements sort of get flushed out as you build. And that doesn't work anymore. Time is not elapsing enough for all the subconscious things for it to pop up. It's like, hey, we should have this. Here's our life cycle. Like our product, it's very data heavy. We're bringing data together from disparate sources and then correlating it and doing all kinds of things and then mashing it into our data model for our customers. So when we think about something new that we're going to start to ingest, literally we'll go and like pull the top 5, top 10 vendors for that product type, for that data, whatever that data is. Maybe it's like a security scanning tool or incident management or whatever. And this is where the bots can be super helpful in actually fleshing out the requirements too. So like, don't sleep on that. We literally go deep research, give it to Gemini or whoever and say, we're pulling together a data model. We're going to do this product. Go find the data models for these 10 products, pull them together. I want to bring them all into a document. I also want you to analyze them and find the commonalities and analyze the things that are different about them, and then propose an initial data model that is universal.
And that takes weeks sometimes. In a real world scenario, doing it by human, it's weeks. I would have a person dedicated to that work.
It's a nightmare.
It's awful. It's some of the worst work you'll do.
But the bots are great at it. And to your point, they'll catch edge cases that you wouldn't find till production. So
well, you have to tell them to check them. That's the thing. You have to tell it to check some of these edge cases to give it the hint or the context that I want you to be checking these edge cases, or else it won't. I'm going to give you an example here. I was working through an API error and the API was returning a 500. Gave it the information. Here's the scenario. Here's when it's doing it. Here's the problem that I think it is. The bot said, okay, well, instead of just throwing the 500 error, I've decided to return an empty array and a 200 when there's an error, and we'll just mask the error. What? You can't do that.
I know a bunch of people that do that in real life too, though. So like, fair enough.
Sure. But that wasn't what I had asked it to do. I said to find the problem, and it just, this was the path of least resistance for it. It predicted that, oh, I should just fix the error by masking the error.
Pretty sure there's a bunch of technology horror movies that are based on that premise, right? Like, oh, humans are bad. I'll just remove all the humans or something like that. Yeah, so for sure.
Well, that's the thing, is that I'll just solve the problem by making it not a problem anymore because it's 500 error.
Well, it's not there anymore. It's a 200 now. It's fine.
That's the thing you have to tell it to not do anymore. Is like, you have to have these guidelines. You log the errors, use observability best practices, all those things that you'd have to think about as you're building out your standard SDLC process. You can kick the team off to just scaffold the app and just get the deployment pipeline in place. And while that's all being done, all right, I'm going to now go working in parallel, and I'm going to start to work on my prod readiness checklist. I'm going to do this. I'm going to start working with the SRE team, do this and this and this. By the time you have any of those meetings, it can have half of that app completely built. Shit, now I've got to go through and audit this thing because the work's already done. I will never have the confidence that it's done the right way because it wasn't done in the step that I want it to.
It's tricky. So this is actually really helpful for me because I haven't actually thought through the solution for this. And we've talked about this in other contexts. So building a PRD, for example, right? Or a report, you get a nice written report, but that used to be an evidence that somebody really spent time and effort and really thought through something on this. You could just kind of trust the quality of the medium of the artifact itself was at least a partial proxy for the underlying quality of the thought that went into it. Well, that's no longer true. I mean, maybe it's a little bit of a meta thought, right? Maybe the amount of thought that goes into something actually isn't the important way to think about it, right? Like, is it getting to the right outcomes? And this is where, like, what you're saying actually helps me because, I mean, maybe it just comes back to it's a little bit more of a meta conversation where it's like, obviously, you can't just be like, here's a 2-sentence thing, go do something. Now, you can do that with a human because that human's got a bunch of built-in context that you've given them over time and they absorb from the environment and all those other things, right? The bots, at least today, can't do that, right? Now, they can absorb context from the environment that's current through certain interfaces and things like that.
And with the right rules, they'll pull it in. If you have like a repository of these things, it will pull them in. That's where these MCP servers are coming in to get the information that it needs along the way without having to give it every time.
Yeah, but they're still nowhere near as good as a really smart person that's been around the space, that knows the product, knows the customers, understands how we got here. Like that's still a way smarter thinker than the bots, right? The bots are
Unless
better
you have just
doers.
that good of documentation that is perfect representation of
Yeah,
somebody's
which
brain,
no one does.
but that doesn't exist.
Which no one does. Because why would you? It would be silly. I mean, now that's becoming less true. That's becoming the bots actually, that type of thing becomes more useful. But also, I mean, the organic brain is still quite great at pattern recognition. Obviously, the LLMs do amazing things. I don't fully understand, but I think there's still some sophistication that happens in the human brain that they seem to have not caught yet, especially when you think about compression of context. I'm sort of working my way to, at least in my own personal workflow, I have a weird job because in 1 hour of my day, I might be a consultant with a customer, like helping them work on a strategic problem, maybe talking to like kind of, then I'm a client success manager with a customer because they've got a complaint or they want to give us some feedback for our roadmap. Then I'm building stuff and working with the team and doing sales. Like, so I'm all over the place. It was built for my ADD brain, I guess. But if I think about like product development or even when you're delegating other work, I think that meta layer becomes a lot more important. What does good look like is always an important part of being a leader and a manager, helping to articulate and imbue your team with that understanding. That definition is one of the most important cultural artifacts of a leader, right? Like what is good? Because that changes. Like I've been places where, say, the CEO level, CEO at a Fortune 500 company, CEO changes out. What matters ripples through the organization pretty dramatically. People don't notice it as fast because like we were at a place and the CEO left and there was an interim and the new CEO came in and he was very kind of eased his way into it. So the whole thing took like 12 months. But if you were to say what mattered in the company the day before the first CEO left versus 366 days later, radically different. The weighting on things changed dramatically. That's good. That's normal. That's one of the most important artifacts of the leader. And that's true all the way down the chain down to the team lead too, right? Although the CEO has the biggest lever there. Taking that and say, okay, how do we apply that into software development? And we need to come up with a new term for it, like AI software development, right? Or development in the AI work. Like, I think it needs a rethinking. I saw somebody on Twitter said this the other day, essentially like, don't show me your code, show me your prompt. In some ways, the prompt is the code. It's an overstatement.
It's the prompt, but it's also the workflow with that too. Because the prompt can be amazing, but if you don't, it's a series of prompts. It's what are you giving it along the way? Are you using MCP servers? Are you using the Ralph loop to iterate on these things? Because it checks its work along the way. It'll self-audit along the way. I even piloted my own tech lead MCP server that I was just saying, hey, I just did this implementation. Go check it. Claude Code was then saying, hey, I'm going to go ask the tech lead if this is a good plan. And the tech lead would respond saying, no, that's over-engineered. Simplify that. And so just simplifying these things without having that human in the loop helps you say, hey, this is too much. This is too little. You think about these, think about that, and then self-improve your development process by not just the prompt, but it's the whole workflow of getting AI-generated code into production. I think this whole episode has been all about the speed. Well, the speed's never been the problem.
Speed's been the thing everybody wants.
Yes.
Because that's been the hardest thing to push the lever on. Now it's like gaps.
Yes. And have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? You're over-engineering that. I was trying to pilot that tech lead is that every time I see these plans come out, I would have to read this big garbage mess of, some pseudocode in this robust plan. And I found myself just pasting that into another Claude instance to say, what is this plan? Because it was just so long. There's a YouTuber that gave me the idea of keeping the plans very, very concise, even sacrifice grammar for conciseness, because it's just a very short, sweet plan is better than a broad plan that can prompt the agent in a direction that you don't want to go into. I was pasting these plans into it, and I finally just said, well, how can I automate this? So that's where I would have a Claude Code hook that says, when a plan is complete, go ask the tech lead for the plan. And then it would go into a loop and iterate on the plan. And so now I'm not having to review these plans as much. It just goes because I put the context into the tech lead. Here's the patterns I like. Here's the patterns I don't like. Here's the logging standards. Here's the observability standards. And then it would self-inject the prompt to put those things in place without me having to do anything. Then it audits to make sure it's there. So those are the things that are more important now.
If I use like a skiing metaphor, right? Like you're doing ski jumps. I'm still trying to figure out how to chain my turns together. I remember when I was younger, my brother took me to try to learn snowboard, and I was terrible. I was just complete disaster. But like I could get going, but like the first thing you learn is like, can you turn and can you link your turns together, right? And I feel like my workflow currently is very much not that. Like what you're saying is like, you do this and ping pong over here and ping pong over there and ping pong over here. And it's all doing it within the loop of the agent. Whereas I'm like, go do this thing and then let me look at it. And then I'll give you instruction again. That's still sort of my workflow. I haven't figured out how to be more hands off in a way that I'm comfortable with, because if I don't do it that way, I have no ownership over the code. I have no ownership over what's happening. It's just this thing that's happening out there. It might as well be like an offshore developer that I'm just shipping requirements to. Maybe I look at the PR at the end, but it doesn't grow in my head with understanding and iteration. And maybe that's good. Those are the trade-offs that I think are interesting as we go forward and the tools get better. Is that necessary? Like, is it necessary for me to maintain the logical architecture of how some of these things work?
I don't think it's a lower level. I think it's more important to understand like the bigger pieces now of where the pieces fit together now and the patterns. Even in an app, one single developer is never going to know the full app in and out. They'll never do that, even if they've written a lot of the code themselves, because it ages and you forget like, oh, I haven't worked on that in about a year. Let me refresh my memory on that. That's what's happening now, but we're compressing that timeline and you don't have to know everything. I actually saw a quote on X about this and somebody says, well, you're using the bot to write everything. I couldn't quiz you on your code and you give me an answer on it. And yeah, the founder said, so what? I'm in prod, I'm done, and we're working and we're getting closer to our business goals. So what? I don't need to be that lower level knowing all the lines of code, what this pattern is, what that pattern is. As long as it meets the goals and it's keeping things as dry as possible, then okay, fine.
So that's the question though. Like, let's pick at that for a second. If everything's working the way it optimally would, in that type of environment, really what's happened is the engineer is becoming more of a product manager. I'm going to be crass about it, right? Like, let's say I vibe code out a feature. It's technically fine. Everything's great. But then it just like falls flat with the customer. They're not happy, or it looks broken, or whatever. We built an integration and the mapping doesn't make any sense, or whatever. And then now you need to fix it, but you didn't write any of the code, but that moment needs to be fast. That's the thing that really needs to be fast, where you got to be able to turn around and say, what are the trade-offs that I've made inside this code that then needs to be adjusted, and where can I adjust it, and those types of things. Like, that's where that kind of can come back to bite you. Now, you could just talk to the bot and tell the bot to fix it, and you're just kind of going down the same path. But I think one of the things that's interesting is in most companies, there's at least one or two layers of people in the feedback loop.
And you still need that. You still have to have some of that.
I'm saying if the engineers are going to vibe, again, I'm being crass, just to make the point, like to make it extreme, but the engineer is going to vibe code something out. They need to feel the pain more acutely when it's sloppy from a user experience or product business results standpoint. The technical, fine. The code's purpose has always been to serve a business purpose. The hard part was identifying the business purpose. And in a startup, writing the code and identifying the business purpose are synonymous in many ways. Not perfectly, but there's a lot of overlap there. So, but now if we're just writing the code, like the business purpose, oh, you missed. And so like, that's what I'm saying. Like if I break production historically in a healthy environment, that pain comes to me. Like everybody knows that, and that's fine. And then we do things to make sure that doesn't happen. But in this case, and again, I'm talking about, this is not our stuff necessarily, but I'm just saying hypothetically, if I ship something that's got properly vetted and it hurts in the customer environment, how do I feel that pain? Like, how do we engineer so that makes obvious sense?
Well, that's where your automated testing is so much more important now. You're shortening that loop to get something into production. But if you haven't put some work into building automated tests, you're still failing, because these agents, these bots, they thrive on quick feedback. And that quick feedback is your automated test. So you build out some automated tests and beforehand align on, say, hey, these are the tests. You cannot modify these tests. Write the implementation to these tests. I've set the bot go overnight. It will have this gigantic feature done overnight because I just have good automated tests in place. It's not directly answering what you were mentioning about feeling the pain, but the point is that if you aren't putting some automation in place to stop that from happening, you're trying to have all the benefits without any of the self-improvement and the drawbacks of that, because you can't just let something go to the races, build this big feature, not vet it, ship it to prod, and just hope that your customer doesn't get impacted by it. You have to have some automated test on things to know what is right, because these bots don't know. If you don't tell it what success looks like, it's just going to throw something against the wall. You're going to be the manual QA.
Basically, there's a bunch of things happening all at once, and they're changing constantly. Claude Code dropped its newest thing and seems to have like taken a bit of a step function forward in December. And I've been playing around with GPT-5.2 Codex the last couple of days. I'm actually surprised that they've continued to get better. I thought it was going to flatten out a lot more than it has on the coding side. And then this like cowork, I wasn't terribly impressed with cowork. It just feels Gemini's been able to do most of that stuff for a long time, and it's natively integrated with all my data. So like, it's not that exciting, but maybe I'm just an Anthropic hater. It's not clear. In many ways, if we think about like what happened with CI/CD and infrastructure as code, collapsed the process of shipping code to production. So one guy or gal could write the code, write the Terraform, write the pipeline, off you go, right? Whereas most companies, in most places, that the specific skills you needed to do all those things was too much. It was very few people that could do all that, right? Like they could set up the server and install the OS and get it configured and get the hard drive on it and get, all that was just too much. But anybody can do a little Terraform or CloudFormation or CDK or whatever. And I feel like in many ways, this is sort of happening for the rest of the SDLC too. That's that particular part, but the product artifact, call it the PRD, the development piece, the QA piece. Again, I think you can get those outputs very easily, right? Like to your point, like you write tests, the bots will write the tests, and some of them will be really useful. Know are they the right tests has always been the hard part. And thinking through this different scenarios has always been the hard part. And that's on stuff that you can code. Here's the known outcome I want. The other challenge is like when you're going from prototype to production, there's a technical quality, but it's also like the UX quality. It's almost like a coherence thing. Because like we'll do this, right? We'll have a new screen or a new page or whatever, and we'll throw a mock-up together, or maybe we won't even throw a mock-up together. Somebody will just build something based on the data that we have, right? Like, oh, well, I know this is an application view, so I'm going to just throw, these obvious things on the screen and off you go, which is, again, fine, but needs to be iterated to get better. I think there's two distinct things that we're sort of saying in terms of how do you like have an AI-enabled SDLC that's really successful, or PDLC that's really successful. And it's like, I think it's more structure and meta thought up front as best you can. Not necessarily that you're going to write a 4-page document to feed into as a prompt. One, you want as much global context as possible so that when the next feature gets built, what is your product? Like what's DevGrid? Like you don't have to explain DevGrid to the agent each time, or whatever your product is, whatever your app is. It can pull from that. It can generate, again, its own requirements better. The other thing is just accept that you really are shipping an alpha. And like, that's fine. But if there's a risk of alienating a customer, hide it. Recognize that, yes, you're getting your stuff shipped, but your first version is always going to be crap. You have to at least make the assumption that it's going to be crap. Maybe it isn't always going to be. And not necessarily technically, but in terms of the whole end-to-end, somewhere between the requirements, the technical implementation, and the QA, there's going to be holes because of the way that we're doing things. That's okay because we get something in there. Like, again, in our case, getting it into the customer's environment and like letting the trusted alpha people look at it, the people that are like part of the alpha, look at it and give us feedback using their data is way better than taking all this extra time up front to like really think it through.
There's nuances to everything. You've got the very simplistic world where I call an API, I get some data, put it into my system, and I run some analysis on it, and everything's the same. It's pretty, it's clean. That's just not the world that anybody really lives in. In a perfect world, that would be great. I've got this demo API that gives me some data, but then I get to prod, like, oh crap. That is still very much a thing in a lot of places, a lot more than you realize.
It just happened to us. We built
not just us, it's all these big financial institutions, other things like there's lower environment, there's sandbox environments. They can't even keep them up to date. And they've got thousands of people working for them because everybody's data is so different. The scenarios are so different. The dates things happen are different. Certain classification things with like, there's so many different scenarios that you just can't plan around because it's near impossible. Getting something in where you can test it so you can flag it and get those trusted alphas in place, like you're saying, is that you get that feedback fast and you get to know, does this look right now versus you're taking 3 extra months to have this pristine, sterile version of your customer's data in your environment, which is not without its own risks either.
Well, and you got to train your customers too, right? Like, and know which ones have the personality for this. Like, we've got one of our customers now, and God bless them, they're amazing. But one of the stakeholders, if you put a UI in front of that stakeholder that is not fully buttoned up, it sucks. It has to be really well thought through. There isn't an appetite for iteration, right? It's like, okay, hey, you asked for something. We actually stood something up that's really hard and really complicated in like 2 days. Here you go. but what about this? I want to do this and this and this and this and this. So, that's not the person you show alphas to, right? Like, it doesn't work if you can get to a place with them where you can say, hey, here's the deal. We're going to iterate on this. Here's what you got. Give me your feedback. We'll try to do that. You can have that conversation. Great. But I think part of that is just understanding what's your environment and what's your stakeholder management, essentially. Like, who can you let into that alpha to see?
Yeah, having the next week instead of next quarter answer, that's hard for people to really grasp around. I've struggled with a little bit of this myself, of just saying, well, how long is this going to take? I would used to say 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a quarter, but now it's, I don't know, tomorrow, maybe?
Well, yeah, because like, how long is it going to take us to get it right is the question, right? Like,
Yes.
It's like building a great product becomes a question of tuning more than actually building. This metaphor just came to me. It's so obnoxious, but I love it. It's like the difference between building a cathedral and sculpting a statue. Da Vinci, right? He was like the statue of David, like the most famous marble statue in the world. It's like, he didn't carve that. He just freed it from the stone, right? I feel like it's more like that. It's like, okay, we've got this. We get to block a stone pretty quick in the process, right? Like, you get it wherever you cut it out of the mountain and you stick it in your workshop, boom, that's it. That's your alpha in some ways. And then it's like, all right, cool. Well, what do we peel away? What do we adjust? What do we change? And that's how you get to something that's actually really, really good. And maybe that's just more the way to think about it. It depends on your environment. Like, we had this problem. We both worked at a bank together and we both ran this one product at different times. By the time it came to you, like, things had sort of matured out. But like, what are the things that we were trying to do? Let's ship something. Doesn't have to be perfect. Like, it has to work. Or Stripe under bank, it can't not work. But like, it doesn't have to have all these features. Like, let's ship this one feature. It's just one thing. The cultural appetite of the business leaders at that time, no, absolutely not. Absolutely
And
not.
even when I took it over, it was an extra 6 months before we got anything done, because it was still changing and evolving, and they're more focused on dates instead of, well, what do you want? Well, tell me when it's done. Well, what do you want? And there was just this chicken and the egg thing that was happening of, well, when is it done?
Yeah,
we have to have that definition first.
You have to understand your cultural environment. That's not a place where this type of an approach is going to work very well, because they're not a move fast and break things. They're not a move fast and learn. We're going to make a bunch of upfront assumptions. We're going to wait for it to get built, put it into market, and then hope our assumptions were right. No matter how much you want to change that, that's a major change that usually requires different leadership in order for that type of change to happen. In my experience, that place didn't change at all, and the different types of leadership turned over in the business. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is you have to understand your ecosystem and your product area and your customer's tolerance for these things. And again, you don't have to expose any of this to your customer, right? Like, this is the beauty of feature flags. Hide it all. It's fine. I mean, you can't ship something to production that the backends and the data matter more, right? It has to be safe. It has to be stable. It has to be all those things. I'm not saying, hide that behind a feature flag. No. Anything you put in production on the back end, you have to assume a feature flag is not going to prevent people from accessing. But from an experiential standpoint, you can start to only turn it on or only make it available to certain people and then get that feedback. It's not really QA in the sense of like, I'm looking for bugs, although yes, that's part of it. As the product engineer, as the developer yourself, you need to go in and see how it works, how it feels in real life, in a real customer environment, and then be like, all right, cool. Maybe that's part of our problem. I mean, we've always had this issue where our ambition for what we want to build is so broad. It's like, all right, I want to get here and here and here and here and here. And I think we just have to recognize the cycle a little bit, is, especially on like net new features, is a little bit like, okay, you're going to release, but that's an alpha and you're going to get some feedback. And like, you need to anticipate in your calendar 2, 3, 4, 6 weeks later, you're going to have to come back in and make a bunch of adjustments in order to really make it ready for prime time.
Yeah, your time to alpha is drastically shortened. And also your definition of alpha is diminished at that level. When I say that is that you haven't had that bake-in time of thinking through all of the edge cases, all of those scenarios. So your timeline, and I guess what I'm trying to say here is that it's the first product isn't going to be as shiny as polished as it would have been otherwise. You need that bake-in time to think through and test and iterate that you're going to have to do that either way, but you can't automate that away. That's just something that a human still has to do. Is this good? Is this right? Because it still has to have the repetition of using it too.
That's your differentiator. If you don't need that, why are you building what you're building? There's probably some open source product that does it or whatever. Like, that is the differentiator, is that point of view and thought, even more than ever. You could stand up and clone an app. I mean, people are cloning CRMs and YouTube tutorials left and right. Like, you can stand up and clone an app pretty easily, but it's the underlying thought, it's the underlying philosophies, I'm not an expert in CRMs, but I am a consumer of them. So it's an interesting thing to talk about. There are three companies that sort of personify the different approaches, and maybe not even that different, but like there's Salesforce, which is sort of its own category, right? Like they kind of invented it. They're the beast. They're the behemoth. They're fully configurable. You could do all these other things. They're an app platform, whatever. Then there's kind of the next stage, which is kind of the big company. It's a big company tool, but it's very opinionated. You can't configure it as much, which is kind of like the HubSpot category. I mean, you still configure it, but not to the degree that you would do a Salesforce. And it doesn't have all the other stuff that Salesforce does. And then I look at something like Adeo, which is a brand new product. Those guys are bringing a whole new point of view to the product. The whole thing's much more API driven. It's much more AI driven. You have all these workflows and all these different things that are really interesting and kind of nifty to play around with. But again, the product ultimately is not that different at the technical level. I'm sure it is. But if you break it down, it's still a CRUD app on top of like a handful of key objects and relationships and all those different things. But they're bringing a very different point of view, and that's their differentiator. Their point of view is the differentiator. This is just from watching them from afar as a customer of multiple of these companies. That's been my point of view. What it looks like to me is like they have a very particular point of view. So when they approach a feature that like every CRM has to have or maybe should have, like they're going to build something very different than the HubSpot guys would build. But if you were to take the product requirements might look the same. What the customer's going to ask for are going to look the same. And if you both give them the Claude Code or whatever, they're going to come out roughly the same. So where's your differentiation? Where are you injecting your expertise or your key insight into a product is a really important question. Do you have any key insight?
Yeah, well, that's the thing is that, people don't know those times. It's that thought. What is keeping this different than a HubSpot? If you just say, I want a CRM into Claude Code, you're going to have a bunch of tables. You're going to have a bunch of CRUD-like views, and you're going to have a very, very simple app that's click, see, save, edit. It's just going to be very, very simplistic in its form. So that thought still has to happen somewhere, or else if you, defer your thinking into the bots, it's going to be the same output because it's a prediction model. It's saying, okay, it's a CRM. Oh, I know what that is. And it's going to build a very simple product because that's the highest probability of being what it thinks you need to have. Having those differentiators saying that, hey, look, this is a CRM, but trying to have 3 less clicks than something else would be. It's going to have these types of views and distilling that into your, not just your design guidelines, your very simple product guidelines, and keeping it simple versus trying to reinvent a HubSpot or
Sugar.
Yeah, sugar. Exactly. Yeah. That's fine. If you picture a CRM, that's what you're picturing. And if you just say, I want a CRM into Claude, you're going to get Sugar CRM. That's where Adeo hasn't done that. They probably do some AI under the hood. And
they're very AI. That's in the development.
The point is they're thinking about it differently than somebody would that wants just like a Sugar CRM.
Yeah, totally. So last question for you, right? Like as you think about as an engineering leader or technology organization leader, especially in a startup, there often is not a product organization, right? So the technology organization, the product organization, the same thing. And so if we're talking to other managers over a beer or whatever, like how do we set up processes and checkpoints and life cycles so that this is best accounted for, in your opinion?
It goes back to what I was saying before about the test automation. That's where you have to have a harder line than before of having automated tests that you can prove are good. And so implementation aside, if you have good tests, if you have good automation, if you have good security checks.
Interrupt just to clarify. Are you saying automated, like you want end-to-end like UI tests? That's what you're talking about specifically?
Well,
or are you saying
that's one thing. That is certainly one implementation of that. Yeah. So like your Playwright. Playwright's becoming very popular now with UI testing because the bots can use that and they can text and check their own work. You've got Playwright for UI. You've got Maestro for mobile. You've got all the great tools, Supertest and things like that for...
I'm just wondering which like layer of the testing...
Yeah, so I care about unit testing. If I'm running a larger shop, I still care about unit testing because that's just one of the metrics that you can say, how is your quality? It's not the only one, but where's your end-to-end testing of things? Because those are a lot more important now to say like, okay, I've thought through all these scenarios. I could look at those in a very distilled way. I could even feed that into an agent and say, how is this testing spec? Are there edge cases? Are there corner cases? Are there fringe cases not being checked for? And it's going to give me some things that I don't care about, but it's going to at least give me enough information to say, yeah, this is pretty good. And I can just even grok it myself and say, is this good? And then, like, okay, you've thought about the right things and all right, where is this being checked? Is this part of your SDLC in your CI/CD pipelines? Is this in your development cycles? And how can you prove that your implementation is meeting these? That's becoming a lot more important so that those, to your scenario of just vibe coding and shipping it to prod, didn't accidentally ship something that's going to expose one customer's information to another because like, oh, I'm building a REST API. Okay, it's customer ID/account details. That's realistically what could happen with a prompt gone wild.
You're talking about technical quality assurance. What about sort of more of the product side? Not just did we build something, but does it actually make sense and was it the right thing to build? How do you bake that in?
That's a good question because you just got to use your product and just use it as if you're the customer and just get some reps on using it. If you don't use it, your customer probably won't either. And if it's not important enough for you to test it, then why are you even doing the work in the first place? So it's just getting hands-on and testing it and validating it and getting in the mindset of the customer. You can automate some of that now, but if you've got to automate it, then it's probably not important enough for you to actually check it out. So it's the get your hands dirty. Nothing's going to replace you using your own product in a way that says, is this good enough? We've seen it ourselves. We're using something more. We're finding something. We're getting our hands dirty with testing it out and getting some data in there. Like, oh yeah, we should change this. We should change that. And those conversations are happening later because there's only so much you can get in a mock, in a proof of concept. And so we're making changes in our own product that seem to be late in the game, but it's only once we got our hands on it and started using it, did these things start to actually click and make sense because it just doesn't have that bacon period yet.
I know. I mean, I can think of one example right now where it's like we had it in our kind of test environment where we've got really good stub data or seeded data, but until we saw it in a customer's environment, we're like, oh, I want to do this and this and this, and I can't do it. Like, oh, well, there's a gap. We got to figure out how to solve for that. If we say from like a process and a cultural standpoint, is the developers themselves need to do usability acceptance and usability testing at the end as well and sort of walk people through it. And like,
here's anybody in the pipe, in that chain, not just developers, because developers, they don't have the exposure to the end customer. They have a somewhat of a view of it, but they don't always have the need for that product themselves. So they don't know what's good or bad. They just build it. But there's certain products that as a developer or a person of a certain age or whatever identity, you're just not going to use that product because it's not for you. But somebody who's in the product or business organization, they might have a better usage of it. They might have a better, visibility or perspective on it where a developer wouldn't because it's not built for them.
You probably need to sort of force that, even if it wouldn't happen naturally, right? Like every developer should at least sort of put themselves in that position and pick a persona and play around with the product and understand how the customer would
Absolutely.
use it.
They should try. Like they should absolutely try to do that. It's not going to be perfect. Not everybody has that type of product testing mindset. You might have your all-star developer who's even 10x using some of the best tools, but they just can't get that product development mindset. And that's fine, but somebody has to do it. Somebody on the team has to do it. And if they don't, they need to work with somebody in another or part of the organization who can and say like, hey, this is what we think. Raise the risks that they haven't done that type of testing yet and start talking to their product and business counterparts to say, hey, this is what we got and this is what we need to be better with our development and our delivery. And this is where you need to step in too and hold everybody accountable and not just say that everything can be in the developer's hands. Not everything should be. If you have a bunch of developers building and validating something, you're going to get a very developer-centric tool.
Yeah, that's fair. But at the same time, I would also argue that the space for an engineer that doesn't fully understand the end-to-end and have a way to validate the end-to-end and what the experience is that they're trying to provide, I think that space is disappearing rapidly, right? Like I think that that's going to become an important part of the job. One of the things AI is doing, right, is it's collapsing specialization in a lot of ways, right? You have to be a good generalist and code might be your main anchor in the software engineering part. I mean, again, there's levels and point in career and all those different things.
Let's take a look at like a health product or something like that. You've got a product that's designed for doctors to use.
Yeah.
That's a very specialized skill set that a developer can't just put their mindset in of a doctor and seeing patients and going from back to back to patient to patient to patient and putting information. They can try.
Yeah, totally.
They can't do that.
They are not in above themselves the exact persona that the thing is being built for. Yeah, I completely agree. And that's not going to happen very frequently where you are the exact persona. That will happen.
Yeah, in certain cases, yes. Yeah,
like if you're building a product that's meant where the doctor is the main user and you don't have someone that actually has that quote unquote lived experience involved in the product lifecycle, you're going to have some struggles, right? But I agree with you. My point was the skill of being the engineer over time is going to be more and more. Can you artificially put yourself in that person's shoes?
Or can you build something automation-wise to check those things? Can you build a script yourself to say, have I checked this? Have I checked that? Can I automate this type of flow? The person uses the tab key so much because they're just tabbing through so fast in their flow. And if your developer is not testing for that scenario, could be adding in a lag or latency of a second per tab, that lived experience is going to be shot. Is it, I just need it to be this type of thing because I'm flipping through the keys this fast, or if I'm going from, I can't even think of it because
Exactly.
but you get the point I'm trying to make is that you can build those types of automations or checklists to look at. And if you're not thinking through that and getting that information, that's a miss on the entire organization's plate if they're not getting those mindsets in place.
All right, cool. Anything else to add?
It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's fun. Good times. All right. Well, thanks for the time, everybody. We'll be back again soon. Talk to you guys later.
See ya.
Cheers.